Welcome to Peaceful Zen Talks. I'm your host, Sanana Sharma, and today I'm honored to have here with us Nupur Kumar. Nupur is amazing. She is going to tell you all about it.
I'm really happy to be here, Sanana. I always appreciate our conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to do this with you today. My name is Nupur Kumar, and I'm the managing partner of a CPA firm called Fact Professional. I love to dance. I'm a children of immigrants, so I feel like it creates like a very varied experience.
Yeah.
And I really think it's important to have a lot of these conversations because as women we can contribute and we can talk about our experiences. We're in our 30s now, so it looks a little different than when we were in our 20s.
Definitely.
So I'm excited to talk today.
We'll just dive right in, and can you share a memorable moment in your life or an experience that taught you a little bit about relationships more than anything? Because I know that we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of things that I realize now have almost compounded over the years. Mm-hmm. It's hard to pick one specific moment in terms of relationships. But when I look back, you start to notice, especially when you were taught growing up to give, to be empathetic, to be emotional, to be somebody who's always giving back, you tend to start attracting a certain type of partner. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's one specific moment, but the most recent, I hate to say situationship
It's okay.
that I went through. Yeah, exactly. I hate the word, but it is what it is. But the most recent situationship that I went through, I really started to notice, am I dating the same guy? And I think that moment...
Wait, sorry, say that again?
I realized... am I dating the same guy? Or am I interacting with the same guy?
Oh, okay.
Right? Who the same type of little funny misogynistic comments.
Oh, no.
Right? The little bits and pieces of narcissism. And it really came together for me recently because we had a Galentine's Day with a friend.
Right.
And at that time we all dressed up as our red flag.
Yeah.
And I literally wrote out like all the things that were my red flags. And I started to look down and realized I have been dating the same guy over and over and over. And I think that's a really healthy experience for all of us to go through, is to say, not am I the problem, but am I going after the same person over and over and over and expecting different results?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think as you're mentioning, just recognizing our red flags.
Yeah.
And I hate to say red flags.
Right.
Because as you're mentioning, like, oh, am I the problem? But sometimes we can be the problem too. So we have to, again, dig deeper and really figure out like what are our root causes and why we are the way we are as well. Yeah. Everyone has a good side, and everyone also has a side which really needs to be worked upon.
Exactly.
Not that it's a negative side, but it's just needs healing. Yeah. And I think that's a really good practice that you mentioned. I think everyone should apply it. Especially, it doesn't have to be while you're single. It could also happen while you're being in a relationship, because you really need to learn about yourself throughout the process as well. Exactly. And figure out what your pros and cons are as well as a person. Yeah. So that's a really interesting experience. I'm glad that you're working on yourself in that manner and really figuring out who you are, because that's only going to allow you to get closer to someone who is really going to appreciate that about you, and vice versa.
Yeah, thank you. I think one thing I started to recognize the most is, on the surface level, you can be all kinds of confident. You can be so like, hey, this is who I am, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, having like your own red flag could just be that you don't treat yourself well, and you surround yourself by people who don't treat yourself well. So if you struggle with some level of self-esteem, you keep surrounding yourself with partners or friends and let them just kind of run you ragged, you can't be surprised by the results. You have to sometimes just take a step back. And I think that this past year, between romantic relationships and friendships, it's not just about setting boundaries and saying, I don't want this anymore.
Right.
And pulling back. And I think that's been a big thing for my own journey, is saying, you can have a lot of people in your life, that doesn't mean they're good people.
Yeah.
A lot of really, really good guy friends and good men in my life who show me what it looks like to be a good guy.
Yeah.
But I also have really, really incredible female friends. And I think what's interesting is that most of my female friends always look in. They always blame themselves. They always are trying to work on themselves. Yeah. And so because of that, it's a double-edged sword, because when you're trying to work on yourself, you become, you grow. But when
Yeah.
you're always working for yourself, you always think, am I the problem?
Wow. Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
a really good point.
And
Yeah.
if you always think you're the problem, then anytime somebody does something to you, you will also be in that place where they say, well, I'm the problem. Maybe, and there's no one on this earth is the problem. Sometimes just different energies just don't match.
Right.
But at the end of the day, sometimes you need to say, you know what? It's my environment. It's the people I'm around. Or maybe I just need to go into my own space.
Yeah. And I think like when you feel like you're the problem, a lot of times there might be another person who's constantly telling you that you're the problem.
Right.
So you're going to end up internalizing that and remembering that, oh, I am the problem. Then you're going to constantly think that.
Yeah.
So in order to, again, unlearn that, it is really quite challenging. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on working on ourselves.
Yeah.
Which can be a good thing, but then as you mentioned, it could also be like, am I problematic?
Right.
So I think really recognizing that and understanding it on a deeper level will help every aspect of your life.
Yeah. That's a good point.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, that's hard. One, just
Or
one?
maybe three. You're like, I don't know, let's do it.
I would write myself like a thesis and an essay and everything else, a dissertation on just... I think one thing I would tell my younger self would just be focus on what makes you happy. And, I'm very extroverted. I spend... It's hard for me to think internally. It's hard for me to focus on myself because it's a blessing and a curse when you're very people oriented.
Yeah.
The biggest extroverts are actually the loneliest people. The people who surround with the most people are the people who are the loneliest.
Yeah.
And I've found, and this is like a tested theory of mine, because the more I talk to people who are as extroverted or maybe more than I am, they will tell me the same thing, because the truth is, when you're surrounding yourself with people all the time, you're not connecting with yourself at all. And if I had to go back, I would say, Nupur, stop going to all these birthday lunches and all these parties. And yes, it's so cool that you got invited to 4 parties in one night.
Yeah.
But you may not even remember any of these people. And
it's true. Yeah.
In 6 months from now, you may not remember them.
Yeah.
And aside from that, maybe a night in reading a book and just chilling with yourself will provide you more value. But I will also say, if I didn't go through all that, I wouldn't be where I feel today. And in 5 years from now, I'm going to have a different set of advice to give.
Honestly,
to
I would say the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was definitely more of an extrovert.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit more of an introvert at the moment.
Yeah.
But then again, as you get older, you realize certain things.
Yeah.
But I was always around people as well. I feel like I was always like, Saturday, Sundays, it was my escapism because I lived with my mom and dad.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, like my friend's party or this or that. And I was out and about all the time.
Yeah.
Wanted people around me all the time. And being alone, it's like, I wouldn't even know how to deal with myself. I'm like, wait, what's happening? So I would call my friends. Oh, hey, how's it going? And I would be on the phone. I would be on phone for hours and hours.
I would do that too.
So I'm like, and I would the reason why I would give the same advice is because when you're not connecting, if I was able to maybe connect with myself at a younger age.
Yeah.
I went through my experiences and I'm glad that I went through them. But yes, that's the advice, same exact advice I would give to myself as well.
Yeah.
And, being able to really connect with people who want the best for you and genuinely want to see you shine.
Yeah.
I think that's also a beautiful thing. And that's something that I feel like when I was younger, I would just ignore all of that. I would just be like, oh, whatever. I just want to be friends with everyone.
Yeah.
More than depth.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reflecting on this is that at the end of the day, we both come from an Indian background. But a lot of backgrounds, Latino backgrounds, different, Chinese backgrounds are all community oriented.
Yeah.
You are taught from a very young age that it's about community over self. And there's so much beauty in that, right? There's so much sacrifice in that. Mm-hmm. There's so much that you can learn from that. Mm-hmm. And you learn how to think outwards, which is beautiful.
Right.
But the problem is, and then America teaches you self over community.
Yeah.
And I think if you can marry both of those thoughts together,
it's very true.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But what happens is for a lot of people who are growing up if you're an immigrant or you moved here and you come from that community-oriented background, you think to yourself, your job is to be outward. Your job is to be connected with family, with friends. Because I know from my parents, they are still learning that discernment. Because they came from India. They're very Americanized. They know, they connect with people from all different backgrounds, but they're still learning how to stop themselves from like always going out there and spending time with people. So
Same exact thing as you're mentioning, because you're used to it. You're used to the social aspect of it. And it's nice to have that as well, because we do need to interact and be able to share ourselves with good people around us. But at the same time, as you mentioned, just reading, relaxing, I think I'm appreciating that in my life more than anything at the moment. And it's okay to say no.
It's not just okay. You should say no. If you feel maybe, just say no. And it's not to not give yourself other opportunities. I was talking to one of my employees, and she was mentioning, I don't feel comfortable doing this. That's a place where I would say yes. Because maybe this is going to give you another opportunity.
Growth.
Right? But if you're saying no, if you want to say no because you just don't feel like that,
for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think we all had that people pleaser tendency growing up. So at times I would just say yes, and then realize hours later, I'm like, oh, why did I even commit? And then, obviously if you commit to something, you want to show up as well. But I think it takes a lot to really know yourself. And understand yourself, like, how am I feeling, and questioning yourself. Do I feel like going out today? Do I feel like partying today and actually really enjoying myself and going out with friends? And if you do, then go for it. But then if you really don't and your energy level is low, then you really have to just go to sleep or do something that's going to help you so that you have a better day the next day. You have to really listen to yourself. And I think I'm practicing that at the moment. So I completely understand and resonate with that.
Exactly. And one thing I really reflected on, and that I was someone who used to mention being in performer energy, and there was some truth to that, and I have to accept that I would always feel like it's my job to entertain everybody around me. I would feel like, well, if the party, and people would say, oh, if you don't come, then the party's not going to be that great. And while that sounds great, would be like, oh, look at that. No, it doesn't feel good. In reality, it feels like it's my obligation to be like the entertainer or the party clown or what,
No, for sure.
And I did a lot, instead of socializing from a place of I want to interact with these people, it was socializing from a place of it is my obligation to entertain.
Yeah, that's not fair.
No, it's not fair.
It's not fair for yourself, because you're just you're in a place where you're just exerting so much of your energy, and we need to be able to reserve our energy for a lot of different aspects of our life. So I completely understand. And that's also, I've also been in a situation similar to that. And I really connect with you on this, because sometimes my friends would tell me silence is okay as well. And I'm like, no, I start getting anxiety, or I start feeling anxious.
Feeling the silence with talk.
So I would just, talk sometimes just to talk. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, your true friends who are there, your true friends will also understand that silence is a beautiful thing as well. And you just have that deep connection. So sometimes it doesn't even have to be a conversation. You just understand and get each other.
Exactly. Actually, I was just on a date last week, and usually
I want to hear about that. And we all do.
Of course, all the dating history. But I was just on a date, and it was interesting because the way that I would date even 6 months ago is different. For example, I've always prided myself on the fact that none of my dates have ever ended in less than 2 hours. I've never had an awkward silence, awkward conversation. Sounds nice, but in reality, I was just kind of performing, right? I was keeping the conversation going. I was entertaining the person. I had a 9-hour date once. It was a first date, 9 hours.
Wow.
And it was just easy conversation. And that sounds great, but in reality, one, you're not giving the other person the space to do anything. Maybe I am, but I'm almost guiding the conversation. And the second was that, like you said, silence is so valuable. Leaving just silence is okay. And I very intentionally did that last week. I said, you know what?
That's great.
I'm just not like, I'm just going to sit here sipping my, hot water and lemon and just.
And that also takes practice.
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to just, you're like, okay, I want to share my thoughts. And just sitting down and just, as you mentioned, just quietly observing, that is a skill.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I started to realize is I needed to, and I told you that I have ADHD and somebody has ADHD who, at least my version is I want to info dump. I want to info dump about, like, I have a tax history podcast for my firm, right? Which is about taxes, which we were talking about earlier. And I love info dumping, telling different information. Like, hey, did you know, blah, 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 blah. And I have a lot of my friends say, like, I love to share fun facts. A lot of that comes from, like, wanting to share. So when you're on a first date and you want to share everything about yourself, sounds great, but in reality, you're just info dumping.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's unhealthy.
Do you think that you're info dumping, as you're saying, like, I mean, you love to talk, and all of these things, and same goes for me. Do you think it comes from a place of, are you expressing yourself because you really want to be understood? I mean, we all want to be understood, but do you think it comes from a place of you really want to be validated for who you are?
Yeah, that's, I reflected on that a lot, and I had a great conversation with my mom about this the other day where she said, being from an Asian background, we are taught to always kind of, I don't want to say flaunt, but to constantly communicate our accomplishments, right? Yeah. My daughter is going to this university, she traveled here, my son's a doctor. Sure, so you're taught that that's what you do. When you socialize, you communicate your accomplishments. Mm-hmm. And she was saying that, then I think that there were two reasons that I would info dump. One is I wanted to keep the conversation interesting, but that's not creating a connection. That's just keeping it interesting.
Right.
And the second thing is that I think that it was like me trying to, and I'm the oldest of my entire family, right? Not just my sister, but like all of my cousins. Yeah. Everybody in my family, I'm the oldest. So I was, from a very young age, you're kind of taught, like, you set the tone for everybody. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be the example, but I also felt like, look, if I have all these accomplishments, then I'm valuable. Mm-hmm. And or if I have done all these things or checked all these boxes in life, I've attached value to myself. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And before dating, the step was actually unattaching my self-worth from my accomplishments. Yeah, I've backpacked through India for 3 months. Amazing. Yeah, I've traveled, all over the world by myself. Awesome. Yeah. That's not creating a connection with somebody. That's just sharing anecdotes.
Yeah, and sharing but I mean, that is an incredible thing to do. Like, I mean, I think through experiences and your experiences in life, that's how you do connect. But I think when we do put so much emphasis on our accomplishments, it just kind of sets us back because that's all we know then. Exactly. You need to separate yourself from that because that's, again, I had a podcast with one of my friends, Hidol, and she mentions an amazing thing, and she says, when we die, we're not taking that with us. So,
exactly.
We need to really focus on working on ourselves, and even a little bit of happiness that we can spread to other people, that matters more than being a doctor.
Exactly.
And it's great, if you've accomplished all these things and you worked hard, and everyone should be prideful. But at the same time, I think there needs to be a limit. And I think within our Indian community, it's constantly bragging. Unfortunately.
And it's a lot of communities are like that, right?
And a lot of communities.
A lot of communities.
Exactly. But and not to bash on my own community, I love my people. But at the same time, I think I've been through a lot of experiences where that's the only focus. And I think when that's the only focus, at that point, I don't even want to connect with you because as much as I do, but that's all you're talking about. Where the focus is on how much money I make and what I do and what my position is and all the certifications. And
it's like kind of cavalier and out there.
It's great. I mean, it's not great, but like it's one of those things.
Good for you,
good for you, but at the same time, there has to be a little bit more depth. And I'm sure that person has depth, but that's all they know as well. So it's sad for them. And you see right through it.
Exactly. Well, I think I started to recognize one thing for myself is that you don't need to communicate who you are. That's one of the reasons I don't love dating apps, because you're kind of communicating who you are. Who you are shows up if you are who you are, it's going to show up naturally no matter what.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
If you are a confident person, it's going to show. If you're
Yeah.
playful, it's going to show. They're like, well, you know, what would your friends say about you? It's almost like, well, what would you say? Because you've interacted with me for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I started to recognize is I don't need to
true.
communicate my accomplishments. In reality, who I am, whatever I have had for my 33 years on this planet,
Right.
will communicate themselves.
Yeah.
Because if you show up as you are,
Yeah.
it will just, people feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's very true.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I will share a little personal piece of me as well. I think at times it has a lot to do with your experiences, because for me, I know I chose teaching as my profession,
Right.
and I love kids, elementary education, and I had no idea teaching would be as challenging
yeah.
until I entered the field, right? And I remember growing up hearing, and you know, everyone respects teachers. It is a little bit underrated.
Yeah.
A lot of people would say, "Oh, you're an elementary teacher. How cute. You must have fun all day." And yes, I have fun with my students, but people don't understand how much effort, time, and hard work goes into the profession as well.
Yeah.
And I think for me, for the longest time, I would, because I had been put down for my profession a few times as well, due to the title, and like, oh, you're not a professor at a college, you're a teacher, you teach kids. And you know, there were some scenarios and things that have happened, and for me, when that happened several times, I felt the need to prove myself. And I would say,
for our CPA firm, I joined my father's practice 13 years ago. When I joined his practice, it was 2 employees, and then I joined him.
Right.
We're now a team of about 20. And I know for a fact that I scaled the business.
Yeah.
But you don't know how many times every client who walks through the door makes comments on, oh, how your daddy's business. I'm like, look, dad started this practice.
yeah.
But I've grown it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
worked
now managing
hard.
partner,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to be, he's retiring, or he's going to semi-retire.
Right.
And then that's that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you know, and
If anything, it's
all
a
the
blessing that, you know, your dad has started
course.
it, and now that you're getting to take over it, and on top of that, you're actually challenging yourself and growing so much.
Yeah.
So there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, a family business, growing a family business, doing something that we both enjoy. Like, I didn't know I'd love accounting as much as I do.
Right.
But one interesting thing for me has been that every client who walks through the door, and this varies, either comments on the lack of my marital status, the lack of my children, my weight gain or my weight loss, and of course that it's my daddy's business. They're almost waiting for me to find a real life with a family.
Wow.
And what I think with all of this, and just like what you're going through, is where people keep saying, oh, well, you're just a teacher.
Yeah.
My mom was a teacher, so I heard it my whole life.
Yeah.
They really are almost microaggressions.
Yeah.
Because it's saying, and if you were a professor, right? You've taught at Harvard as a woman, then they would say, well, when are you going to focus on a family? It's one of those things that you can never win.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you can never win, then why are you playing the game?
Right.
That's how I feel. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to work on being better in your eyes or for you. There's no winning here. I'm just gonna let you made a comment that's cute, and you have to find a reaction to it and call it a day. You know?
And then I think, like, in order to not let that affect you, you have to be, again, confident within yourself.
Right.
Confident within your skin, and because people are going to make comments. And I realize that, you know, you can try your best to surround yourself with positive people. I've tried that my entire life, but you will come across that one negative person, whether you walk into the store, you know, and you come across, you might just come across anyone, and they are going to put you down, but it's your reaction to it. And I think it's understanding, you know what, they are going through their own stuff. If you have enough emotional intelligence, you're going to be a little mindful about the comments you make as well.
Right. But, you know, I also started to think to myself, instead of getting angry, right? And some of my team has watched these comments being said. Instead of getting angry, like when they say, when are you getting married? I go, it's a good question. Are you introducing me to somebody? You know what I mean? When they say you've lost a lot of weight, I'm like, well, you haven't been here in a while. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is you have to, I think you have to also find a way through it, is that if you, my feeling is if you react, you kind of let the other person win. right? If you let it bug you, you've let the other person ruin your day. And instead, you have to recognize, where is it coming from for them? You know, for them, marriage is so important.
Right.
Then, you know, maybe they are genuinely concerned, and I respect their concern, but I don't need to take it into myself. And I can do that. I can say, that's a great point. And like and I realized this one time when I was getting my a manicure done, and the guy who was doing my manicure was talking to me about abortion rights.
Okay.
And he's literally holding my hand, using all these tools to do my manicure.
Yeah.
And he is against rights to abortion, right?
Okay.
He's pro-life.
Right.
I'm pro-choice. I think
Yeah.
as a lot of liberal people would be. And I realized that I cannot have a full-blown argument with this guy who's holding these tools and who's doing my nails.
Yeah.
This is not the time, not the place. It's not safe for me to do so. And I just need to not grin and bear it, but we can have a healthy discussion without it like becoming noise. And in the same sense, when people make these comments to you about like you're just a teacher, it's so easy to be like, and I love it.
Exactly. And that's what I say now. And then after that, they're just looking at my face and they're like,
what do you say to that?
Yeah.
Right?
I wish I loved my profession.
Yeah. I love every day. There's challenges, there's ups and downs.
Exactly.
And you know, if you're going to start to show like, oh, look at all the challenges I have, you don't need to give them a list.
Yeah.
You know? No one needs that list. You don't even need that list, you know?
I did want to talk to you a little bit about, I know you mentioned weight gain a few times.
Yeah.
And I remember last time when we were sitting at Barnes & Noble, we talked about this, and I had mentioned to you that I used to do that a lot, where I would, I didn't have the awareness, and when I would see someone, and I felt like, you know, they've been working out or they had lost weight, I would be like, oh my God, you look great. Did you lose some weight?
Yeah.
And it honestly came from such a good place, not where I'm trying to put them down or make them feel bad or body shaming or anything. But I think I had to really dig deep and figure out, like, think of it from my perspective, like, okay, I have to understand that the other person, first of all, I have to be empathetic and understand that you never know what someone is going through.
Right.
That comment can be taken just as similarly where you're questioning someone about their pregnancy or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. You did mention that, you know, these are some comments that some people have mentioned to you as well.
Yeah. You know, I think it's a challenge, right? Because you don't want to live in a world where you're always tiptoeing, right? You don't want to be in a place, because how are you going to create a healthy discussion with somebody or talk to anybody if you're always tiptoeing?
Yeah.
But I do think we live in a society where we think weight equals, if you are fat, you are lazy. And what is fat, right? And you know, there's
it's perception, like whatever you may think of it as. You
know, I've seen people in all ranges. I've seen people who are who don't have a lot of weight on their body, and they never eat healthy, they never work out. And then I see people who have a lot of weight on their body, and they're constantly working out. And they're constantly eating healthy. And you know, my journey has been recognizing that at the end of the day, a lot of it's genetics. Like, honestly, it's like 80% genetics 100%. And hormones. And you know, recently I was telling you that I've been on a bit of I would call it a detox diet, but I've had hypothyroidism for a while, and I've been trying everything, trying different medication. And when you have hypothyroidism, it's very easy for you to gain weight. And I'm 5 feet tall. I've always been a very small eater. I do not like to eat snacks. I don't, if you put a buffet in front of me, I will still eat a very small portion. I eat salad like every day. I eat a very healthy amount of salad. While I cannot pretend that I'm super fit, I was a dancer for so many years.
I remember.
And I still dance, right?
Right.
So the thing is that I think that for a lot of people, when you comment on their weight, it kind of reinforces certain things. And you know, certain people have, you know, ED, that reinforcement keeps that going. And when you gain weight or lose weight, people will constantly comment on it, especially for people who struggle with it. If you have a great metabolism, your whole life you've been kind of a standard weight. Some people struggle with putting on weight. You know, and I think it's for women, if we gain weight, it's a problem. For men who are very skinny and who are not able to retain weight, that's a problem. And so I think it's a hard call to say what's the right thing to say. But what I will say is that, at least I can say from my own experience, is loving myself and loving my body had to first do with recognizing that my body is not like anybody else's and vice versa. Nobody's body's the same. All the information that people throw at you, all the fitness gurus and even doctors that they give you may not be right. Like one of the things I was doing, because I'm a history nerd, doing a ton of history on the impact of famine on Indian bodies. So at the time that India was a British colony, so before India was a British colony, of course, it had the second highest GDP of the world after China. So it was one of the wealthier countries in the pre-colonial India. Then it became a colony, and Britain took all the resources, just like a lot of colonization is. That's colonization. They took all the resources and they sent them everywhere else, and they mismanaged the food in India. And there was mass starvation and famines. And this is not just one famine, but many famines year after year, which caused such a big impact on the bodies of South Asians. Every South Asian got impacted differently though, because the way that the resources were allocated is going to be different. So people who are Punjabi, I didn't know this until I was understanding hypothyroidism, and the thyroid is right here. It's a little gland that causes a lot of issues. And I'm info dumping on you now.
No, this is great. I'm super interested. I think everyone is.
So what I learned is that about 30% of women in the specific state, Punjab, that I'm from, have thyroid issues. How did that come? Well, we don't know. People say it's diet, but realistically speaking, if different parts of India are getting impacted differently, but across the country, the number one thing that is the fact is that it's the diabetes capital of the world.
100%,
And when we look at like a lot of people who have been impacted from that, they typically are places that were colonized or had famines. So the impact, like Audrey Hepburn's such a good example. Like she on the other hand, she was only one generation, but she was very, very, very tiny, and she could never gain weight because there was, I think World War II was happening during that time, and there was a lack of food in that area, and so she had to cut back on what she was eating. So that impacted her body in 1 year. And it impacts everybody differently. So what I'm saying is that I had to recognize for myself that my body's not going to respond the way that somebody else's body responds.
Definitely.
And I need to treat my body differently.
And I think that's, you made so many good points. And I think, again, recognizing that the goal is not to look a certain way.
No.
The goal is to feel good internally. Because every time you do that certain exercise for yourself, happy endorphins, you feel good, and accepting yourself for who you are, as you mentioned, genetics and whatnot. I think social media is social media impacts us on there's a lot of great things about social media, but there's also negative effects as well, where we're constantly comparing ourselves. And even if we don't want to compare ourselves at times, with these models and these pictures popping up, you subconsciously are comparing yourself, because you're thinking like, whatever your insecurities may be, whether it's about gaining weight or the way you look, your nose, your ears, whatever it might be, it's going to pop up as you're looking at that person. So I think recognizing those thoughts and understanding what your end goal is. Your end goal should always be, again, we mentioned this many times, ultimately happiness, and accepting yourself for who you are. And that's also a journey, and that's not something that happens naturally within a heartbeat either.
No. And one big thing that because I love studying history, you start to recognize, a lot of little girls want to look a certain weight or look a certain way because they want to be beautiful. And you want to be beautiful because that's what you're treated. That's what little girls are told is valuable. Not as much anymore, but I know when we were growing up, that was the case, right? In the 90s and the 2000s, that was the case.
Right.
So the interesting thing to me, and that was very healing for me, just because I love information, is what is considered beautiful changes every decade. Every single decade, there's a different. When we were in the 90s, thin eyebrows were popular, and then thick eyebrows became popular, and now thin eyebrows are again popular. So if you naturally have thick eyebrows, you won sometimes and you lost other times, right? Like that's what it felt like, right? If you right now, because of Kim Kardashian, and spicy white is considered attractive, right?
Wait, what is that?
Spicy white means that you're. Clearly, I live too much on the internet, but like the idea is that like you have traditionally Caucasian features, but then you have the assets of a of an using the word exotic, but like a different culture woman, where you might have bigger breasts or bigger assets.
I see. Okay,
or, you know, she of course has black hair.
Right.
Black hair wasn't considered as beautiful compared to like blonde hair.
Right.
So all those things shift with time. Right now, there's so many more, you know, South Asian women like Priyanka Chopra or Avantika, who's in Mean Girls. And then you think to yourself, everyone's like, oh my God, they're so beautiful. And I'm like, why didn't I get this? Like, what if this existed when I was a kid, I would have felt so different about myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing is that's why, you know, they talk about representation. Representation from ethnicity is important, from you know, from the LGBTQ movement, that's important from all aspects. But I also think when they talk about representation in terms of body positivity, instead of choosing like a specific body type, and being like, look at her.
Right.
In reality, everyone's beautiful. Everyone, you can find beauty in everybody.
And everyone has preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Yeah. But I think ultimately it all starts within you.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy journey. I think it's reminding yourself because for me, it's interesting because I remember in middle school, I used to be very, very skinny.
Yeah.
I'm still skinny, but like, I mean, again, everyone has their own preferences. But I remember in middle school, I really wanted to gain weight, and it was really hard to gain weight because I would always think to myself, curvy is in, or high school, middle school and high school. I think that's when everyone started talking about curvy, and I had no idea. I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, I'm not. And then I started comparing myself to my classmates, and I wanted to look like them, and I would be curious. Okay, like at that point, I didn't love myself, obviously, because I was so young and I was influenced by external factors. And then later on I realized, oh my goodness, like I am so dumb for focusing on that. Like I should be happy with what I have.
Right.
And I also it's so funny because I'm 5'8" and I wanted to be shorter because I would think to myself, oh my goodness, like if I wear heels, I'll look like a giant. And all these girls who are like 5 foot, that's so great. They can wear heels all the time.
Yeah.
So the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
You always want what you can't have, right? Like I have this, one of my best friends, she's 6 foot tall, gorgeous, blonde, blue eyes, Ukrainian woman, gorgeous. Yeah. And she looks at me, 5 foot tall, you know, curvy Indian girl. Yeah. And she's like, she sees my hair and she's like, oh my God, I wish I could have this, you know? And I'm just like, you got beautiful blonde hair, right?
Yeah.
Or she like these Indian eyes, and she's got these beautiful blue eyes. I'm 5 feet tall, and I'm like, I wish I was taller. You know, like I would. I'm like, can I round up? And then she's 6 feet tall, and she's like, I can never wear heels. It's you always want. You can't have.
And on top of that, I think it took amazing friends in my life to be able to be like, yo, you gotta appreciate X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I had these qualities. Like, you know, you don't understand or you don't realize it because throughout your life, if your mindset is a certain way and you're thinking lower about yourself, or if you have low self-esteem or lower confidence, and you're not going to appreciate what you have and all the blessings you have in life as well.
Exactly.
With the community that we come from, I know that the topic of transgender can be, I would say, ignored or really, you know, looked down upon. And so what has your experience? I know your sister has transitioned, so would love for you to open a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's so important to talk about because I think there's still a lot of noise around being trans. And so some backstory is that in 2020, it was of course pandemic year, and my sister, who came out as trans. So she was male and she's transitioning to female.
Right.
And I think that the journey for her obviously is going to be a lot harder. And I think that's the most important thing to remember is that you can have all your own feelings about whatever's going on. At the end of the day, the turmoil and the chaos, or maybe and of course like the butterfly moment for her of coming out, it's her journey. And I'm her older sister. So one thing that I had to really recognize is it's not about me, it's about her, and how do I support her through what she's going through. And I also think that when you set the tone, that makes a big difference. So I didn't realize to what degree of liberal my parents were until she came out. And I also didn't realize to what degree like they had the capacity for unconditional love as parents.
Wow.
Which was really incredible.
And you won't hear that as often, you know,
No.
especially with the community that we come from,
Yeah.
and parents being able to accept. That's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges, would you say, that your family face supporting your sister through her transition?
You know, I think a big factor for us, so first off, it's very rare for families of like immigrant backgrounds to go to family therapy.
Right.
We had been in the process of doing family therapy on and again and off again whenever we were struggling. And I think it taught us all really great tools to be healthier and kinder to each other. So that was one thing which I feel very, very blessed that they're so open to it. My sister's the one who initiated it.
Okay.
But aside from that, I think challenge-wise, my mom and I are very very protective. So we get into anger mode, and it's not about, and it's not about anger mode in the sense that if people misstep, that's normal. If you don't know the terminology, I am still learning the terminology in order to support her. I'm still reminding my parents of the social nuances because they don't know. And I think that's a big problem with discussing trans issues or LGBTQ issues is when people don't know, we don't give them the graces to learn. And that's been a big thing for me is that, you know, she's not as social as I am. So a lot of times what happens is I'll be talking to somebody in my family. They're like, how's it going? Yeah. And I kind of take it as my moment, not to educate because that sounds so holier than thou, but to just say, hey, it's going well.
Right.
And I think that's been a big thing. We weren't struggling with as much challenge because once we set the tone as a family, we all said, this is who she is. Yep. We love her no matter what. Yeah. I love this person regardless of gender. Because as I said, unconditional love means gender is a condition. If you can say, I love this person no matter what.
Definitely. And
that's my biggest come away. A lot of people, they're like, well, how do you feel about pronouns and how do you feel about gender? I'm like, it takes the joy in her face when we would start calling her her. Or we started calling her by her new name, and we let go of her dead name, which is her old name. She would kind of do a little happy dance. Aww, yeah. And it happened every time. And now it doesn't happen as much, but every time she's passing and people do call her ma'am, I see this little twinkle in her eye. I think to myself, if it takes that little to make someone happy, then do it. Let them be who they are. Exactly. And I think that's been a big thing for me to support her in. And my challenge personally, and everyone has their own challenges. My challenge personally was, as her older sister, I'm 5 years older than her, I honestly felt guilt because people who are trans, they go through so much emotionally. They go through, like the highest, the percentage of suicide in the trans community is higher than any other kind of community. So I felt guilt not supporting her and not maybe seeing the signs, or maybe I saw the signs, but I wasn't sure what they were. Right. And not giving her the space. Did you have a certain reaction when, when she started transitioning? Like, what? I mean, obviously you had many reactions, but what was your first initial reaction? So the interesting thing was, so we have this thing, again, we're a business family. And like, my dad runs a business, so when we were kids, our go-to thing was whenever there's something happening, we would have a family meeting. And this family meeting would have an agenda. This is seriously what we would do. I can imagine you guys sitting down and, like, having a clipboard and everything. It would feel like that. It would definitely feel like that. And again, some of these things, like going to family therapy and having a family agenda and a meeting, it sounds like so structured. So she called a meeting. She called a family meeting. And I think all of us knew what was coming. And all that happened. I didn't know. You all wanted her to bring it up, right? Just let her go. I think she was ready. She was ready to bring it up. We didn't necessarily know. So my father didn't really know what trans was. My mom knew some of it because she was a high school teacher. Of course, So she's exposed to some of it. I spent a lot of time at CSUN, a lot around the LGBTQ community, and I myself identify as bi, so with that in mind, I had some knowledge. But at the end of the day, it's different than being in it. So with all of this, when she did come out, before she did, I went upstairs, I gave her a hug, I said, I love you no matter what, just remember that, and I'm here to support you no matter what. And we went downstairs, and then she came out, and we said, great. But for my parents, it was, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean next? Right. Because my family were very like, what's the next step? And I think that was the hard part, is that the next step was, a lot of things that, I don't want to go into all of it because it is her journey.
Yeah.
But I will say, at least, because I only want to respect her by talking only about my experiences, but I'll say that the next steps were us going back to family therapy, talking through it, talking about what happens. There's an awkward phase where we're still using the wrong name.
Right.
There was a moment where we decided where she needed to come up with a new name. And of course, me being me, I made a whole spreadsheet of all the names that I thought would be great for her.
Right.
And I think that's been an interesting challenge is knowing, and it kind of taught me as a sister how to take a step back.
Yeah.
And give her space to have her own journey. Because as an older sister, I always wanted to be there for her and take care of everything and make sure that nothing happens.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether she's my brother or sister.
Right.
Now, I'm like, okay. You come to me when you need something.
Yeah.
And I also think one challenge that I've gone through is when she came out, my question was, you and I have this 30 years worth of knowledge on how to do our hair, how to do our makeup, how to remove hair, how to carry ourselves in terms of safety in the world. Having all of that in one go is a lot. So I felt, and I have a lot of younger cousins who are all women.
Yeah.
And I taught them how to shave their legs, how to do their makeup, how to do everything.
Right.
I'm still struggling with this where I keep telling her, if you have questions, ask me. I'm here for that.
Do you have any advice for people who are very close-minded when it comes to these things where, they've grown up a certain way?
Yeah.
And, not just in our community, a lot of different communities. What advice do you have for them to be a little bit more empathetic or compassionate?
Yeah.
Towards any given situation similar to your families.
Yeah. I think you have to find that within yourself. I can tell you my father shocked me by how open he was about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's so incredible.
Yeah.
But the truth is, if you have a child, if you have a sibling, and you really, truly love them, and then you have to accept them for who they are.
Right.
And if that's if they choose a different occupation, if they choose a different gender, if they choose a partner you like, if you really want to tell somebody you love them and they come out to you as trans, or they come out to you as gay or bi, or they come to you with any type of thing that you don't have.
And this is such a unique situation. This is such a unique situation because for you and your family, you guys being as accepting as you are, again, there are so many families who disown their kids, or where they go through, where they kick them out of their household.
Yeah.
So in a situation like that, what can those people do, especially when they are feeling really, really down? As you mentioned, the suicidal rate is really high.
So one thing my sister actually said point blank when she came out is she almost felt guilty because of how easy her coming out experience has been, which I'm so happy to hear.
Yeah.
And it's such a blessing. And I also want to commend not just my family, but despite the fact that we're in an Indian community, the second that she came out, every single person asked her, "What's your new name?" And they changed pronouns. Every auntie, uncle, everybody, not people related to, everybody quickly changed. And she was invited to a bridal shower, all women bridal shower, within like 2 months of her coming in.
Wow.
So the point I wanted to make is that I think the biggest thing for people who are going through this experience is know that maybe you're just not around the right people.
Yep.
And you will find your people, you will find your chosen family. And if your family chooses you first, great.
Yeah.
If not, look for your chosen family and know that there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. And if your family can't accept you for who they are, then they're losing out on continuing a relationship with you. And that's their loss.
Right.
And one thing I had to learn for myself is I had a brother for 25 years and I've had a sister for the past few years. And while I loved every moment with my brother, I also had to think to myself, that wasn't who she really wanted to be. So now I am meeting this new person on their terms. And if
still your sibling.
Still my sibling.
Yeah.
We still shared 25 years and now 28 years together.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Having the same parents, having the same family struggles and all that.
Yeah.
But now she's a girl. Yeah. And now all that means is that she might dress a little differently. Yeah. She might carry herself differently. Right. Her things that she used to be interested in, she might not be interested anymore.
Her
she
heart
might have been
and soul is still who she is.
Yes.
Prior to even now.
Yeah. And feel, you know, every older sibling is a little worried about their younger sibling, especially with our age difference. I feel so lucky to have just seen her just blossom and become just, you know, like I said, a butterfly. It's like she was in a cocoon for so many years. And a lot of people who are trans, they have Peter Pan syndrome where they don't want to grow up. Because when you grow up, that's when you start getting hit with puberty and gender norms. And she came out a lot later in life. And I commend her for doing that too, because it's a long time.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, if you really, truly love somebody, if you really, truly value them, then you need to get past your own biases. I also think that, and for me, again, history always helps.
Right. It's great.
That's why I say history helps. Is we live in a society today where we believe or we kind of did, where there were two genders, male and female. If you look at Native American tribes, they don't believe in male, female. They have a few different genders. If you look in India and they have the Hijra community, that's I like to compare Hijras to kind of drag queens, although Hijras are different. They are intersex. But like they're performative. Right? This idea of this fixed gender is very new to the world.
Yeah.
And if you recognize that it's new, instead of saying, well, this is not how things are done, you start to recognize maybe this is not how things are done in the past, like, 100 years.
Right.
Or in America.
Yeah.
But if you look at all these other tribes and cultures, all these things are in flux.
Yeah.
They're always in flux.
Yeah.
So you cannot use this logic that that's not how things are done.
Right.
Maybe you didn't do those things or your grandmother didn't do those things.
It's being closed-minded, unfortunately. And I think in order to learn and grow, you have to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's okay if certain topics are uncomfortable for you to internalize, but I think the more you learn about it and just having a discussion as we are and spreading awareness is the most important. And that's you getting closer to being more open-minded and learning about what else is out there and like more knowledge and understanding through compassion is huge. Exactly.
And I'll put it on every sibling out there is that if you aren't trans and you have a trans sibling, be their advocate, be their biggest advocate. Yeah. Because if my parents do all the research, they learn, they listen. If your parents don't do that, then you're the biggest protector of that sibling, right? You're they're not going to come to you first. Of course, they want parents' acceptance. But if you can accept them for exactly who they are and really, show up for them. That's, if your sibling comes out to you as anything, it's your opportunity to show them that you really are going to put your money where your mouth is.
Definitely.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Is that I cried for the first month, literally month, because I felt like I was hit by a truck. Because my sister came out to my hairstylist first before me. And all I could think was, I'm so happy she had that support.
Right.
But I also felt so guilty for not being there for her. And I've gone through that. I've recognized that.
And maybe you would have been there, but at that moment, she just didn't feel comfortable to share with you being her sibling.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not her job to come to me so I can feel better. That's not the point.
Yeah. But you're just kind of doubting yourself. Like, maybe if I was a little bit more supportive, like she would have opened up.
If I was listening more. I'm a bit of a tough love person. Maybe if I pulled back. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not a parent, but I guess that I'm sure parents feel like that all the time. Like, shoulda, woulda, coulda. But I also think that, I think that it's just, as I said, it's your moment to show up. It's your moment to be there. And I am so incredibly proud of my parents, but also I'm telling you, every person who comes from an Indian origin or different background who's quickly changed pronouns, she chose her own name. And what I think is really fascinating is she never connected with Indian culture, but she did have an Indian name. So her dead name was Indian, and she chose an Indian name for her. As her new name as well after she transitioned. So I think that's really incredible. Yeah. I think that it's interesting that she's still connected in that way. And she didn't want to discard her roots. She just wanted to have a new connection. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nupur, for sharing your journey and especially all of this, personal family stuff that honestly people can learn from. And a lot of people don't want to come out and share their journey at times, especially get so personal, because they're so afraid or fearful of people judging them. So I just wanted to put that out there. Really appreciate that. is there any one last advice that you would like to share with the world? Maybe something that you remind yourself every single day that keeps you going?
You know, one thing I've been thinking about a lot is I have a lot of perfectionist tendencies. And whenever I'm around people, and I surround myself with people who also have perfectionist tendencies.
Yeah.
And whenever we make a mistake or we trip up on a word, we always kind of fault ourselves for it.
Always.
We get hard on ourselves for it.
Yeah.
And these days, all I've been doing is whenever I make a mistake, I laugh and I go, oh, look, you're being human. You know?
Yeah.
And it's a constant reminder.
Yeah,
Every time I make a mistake, I'm like, haha, look at you being human.
Right.
And I love that because it's a reminder that we're not supposed to be these perfect put together packages of people. We're not supposed to be anything.
Yeah.
We're on this planet for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
We do our thing and then we leave,
Yeah.
you know, get in. You know, that's how I like to think about it.
So true.
One thing, at any time, my mom the other day was like, I put too much salt in the food. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, look at you being human. That's so crazy. And that's the one thing that I really am living with is that
That's
instead
great.
of being so hard on yourself for those moments where you're struggling or something's going wrong, just remember you're just being a human, doing human things.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
And I think just laughing it off as you're saying.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that advice. I will also apply that because sometimes I'm hard on myself as well.
It's you know, it's when you can be hard on others because you also want the best for yourself.
Of course.
And then
Yeah.
you don't need to be. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Thank you so much.
No,
really,
thank you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great conversations. And I'm sure everyone will learn so much from all the topics that we covered today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Loved it.